This is what we're going to make with Paper Playground in less than 5 minutes. This demo is using Paper Playground 0.0.3, and this tool is still in its early stages of development, so please keep that in mind and know that it will change and improve in the future. First, we need to think about the fundamental components that compose this system in terms of model, view, and controller. A pendulum is basically 2 points in space, the anchor point and the bob. We will create position model components for each one of those. We might want to control the period of the pendulum, so let's make a number model component for that. We also care about the distance between the bob and the anchor, so let's also make a number model component for that. In the view, we want to show where the anchor and the bob are. Let's create a circle view component for each point in space. We will also have a sound view component, and we will need it to play when the bob passes through the lowest point in the swing. Finally, we need to describe how the bob should move over time. We will create a controller component that will update the position of the bob based on the period and the length. Now that we have a plan, let's start building in the creator interface. Let's start with a program for the anchor and give it an appropriate title. Let's create the model component for its position and call it anchor position. Let's create the controller for the position. The bob is going to move relative to the anchor, so this anchor can exist anywhere. Let's just put it at the center of the anchor paper for now. Finally, let's create the view representation for the anchor. It will be a small circle called anchor circle. The circle view is dependent on the anchor position model, so we will select that model component as a dependency, and we will use the available variables to set the center X and center Y position of the circle in the custom function accordion. Now let's create our pendulum bob. Like our anchor, we will create a model component for its position and call it bob position. Let's create the period value for the pendulum here and call it period. We will set it to 5 seconds for now. Let's create our length value for the pendulum and call it length. We will set it to 300 for now. Let's create the view for the bob. It will look like a circle, but we will keep it a bit bigger than the anchor. You can set the radius here. We also want the bob view to move with the bob model, so in the custom function tab, we select the bob position as a dependency and use the available variables to set the center X and center Y of the circle. Finally, let's create our bob controller. This is what will make the bob move like a pendulum over time. We go to the controller tab and the animation sub-tab, and in this tab we can write some JavaScript that will be called every few milliseconds to update the components that we want to change. So we select all of the model components that describe our pendulum. That includes everything so far: the anchor position, bob position, period, and length. The interface shows the variables and functions available to us from our selected components. We also have access to DT, the amount of time that has passed since the last update, and elapsed time, the total amount of time that has passed since Paper Playground started running. I'm guessing that making our bob move like a pendulum will involve using sine and cosine trig functions, but before writing that on our own, let's use some AI assistance to get us started. In this chat box, I'll ask it to help me make the bob move like a pendulum. Great. It gave me a function that looks pretty reasonable and uses the correct variables and functions. I'll take the implementation and put it into our code area. Let's make sure our controller has a name and create it. Let's send this much to Paper Playground and see what it looks like. Great, it's moving like a pendulum. We can finish by creating our sound component. We'll go to the Sound tab, use one of the included sounds, and give our component a title. We want it to play when the bob is at the lowest point in its swing, and I'm going to ask our AI assistant to help us with that. My chat message is, can you play the sound when the bob is at its lowest point in the swing? In this implementation, it plays the sound when the bob position is exactly at the lowest point. And I'm worried that that won't exactly happen when the update function is called during animation. So I ask the AI to adjust this implementation to give it a little bit of tolerance so that we hear the sound more often. The chat message is, that looks good, but I worry the position won't quite equal the length when the update function is called. Can you fix that? Okay, that looks like a better implementation. So I'll copy that code block and put it in our editor above. I'm going to adjust the range that it gave me for the tolerance because I think the default value it provided was too small. And we'll create that component. Let's send this to the playground and see how it behaves.